1,
2,
3,
4.
Monster movie.
Fun time, go! Monster movie.
Fun time, go. Monster.
Movie.
Fun time.
Go!
Monster movie. Fun time, go.
With Precious D and Honeybee.
Fun time, go!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, we have a special guest with us today, Eric McEver, director of the recent, I guess you'd call it a kaiju film. It's got some kaiju in it. It's kaiju adjacent. Is it Ike Boys or Ike Boys?
Ike Boys. Yeah,
Ike Boys.
Japanese for go.
Go boys. So this came out, what, 2019?
It's been a long journey. So we shot the film in the beginning of 2020, and then our post-production coincided with basically the heart of COVID. But then
Sure.
we premiered in autumn of 21, had our festival run, launched on streaming about a year ago, so October of 22, and things have been building from there.
Yeah, so we met briefly, for the benefit of our listeners, we met briefly at G-Fest.
Yeah.
And set up this interview there. They showed the film at G-Fest. I had actually bought it on Vudu a few months before, and then it sat in my queue for a while. And then right before G-Fest, I was like, oh, I better watch this. People from it are going to be there. But then we got to see it a second time at G-Fest. I saw it a second time. I think that was Honeybee's first time seeing it. That's my co-host. She's not here right now. But we really enjoyed it, and everybody at the festival seemed to enjoy it. So tell me a little bit about your inspiration for this movie.
Well, it's one of those things. It sort of comes out of both the things that I like and the things that I care about deeply. The movie is semi-autobiographical. It is shot in my hometown, and there's a whole lot of me in the main character. Down to the fact that that's the school we filmed at is the school I grew up at. There's the quilt that my mother made for me when I was a child. That's on the main character's bed. There's a lot of little things like that. I didn't really set out to make a semi-autobiographical film. When I make films, I try to. Making a film is really, really hard, and it's not worth doing if you don't really care about it. So what I always try to do is I try to combine things that I like with things that I believe deeply and think are of value to the audience. And for whatever reason, growing up and sort of the journey from childhood to adulthood was deeply on my mind the past few years. And I did some thinking about that, and a big part of my childhood was tokusatsu and anime, and I thought, well, okay, there's an opportunity here to make a really good coming of age film, featuring these things that I loved, and featuring some themes that I believe deeply. And the other thing I started thinking about is, I've had my own journey. I grew up and, loved anime and tokusatsu and went on to actually live in Japan for most of my career. My story is unique, but it's also not unique. There's a whole lot of people in both my generation and younger who grew up obsessed with Japan. And I thought, well, there hasn't really been a film made for that Japanese cultural diaspora. So I thought, well, this is my chance to make that.
Yeah, it's very clear in the film, your love for these things. Folks, if you haven't seen it yet, we're going to have spoilers. We're going to just go ahead and talk about things. So you can watch it, though. If you haven't seen it yet, you can see it on Tubi for free, or Amazon Prime, or Plex, or Freevee. Or you can rent and buy it on all the other things, the Vudu and the Google Play and all of that. And, of course, I recommend that you do watch it if you haven't seen it yet. It seemed to me the movie was very much about it's about a number of things, but about the intersection of American and Japanese culture. Yeah. Because there's not only a couple of American kids that are obsessed with Japanese culture, but we see the flip side, a Japanese kid who is obsessed with American culture, specifically Native American
Right.
culture, the most American culture.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, like there's more in this film than you would think that comes straight from life. I mean, so the lead characters, Sean and Vic, they're very much based off of me and and my best friend from childhood. And I mean, look, there's a heavy dose of fiction in there, but on some level, yeah, well,
You think?
on some level, this actually happened. Let me put it that way. Now, so in the film, there's
Right.
an exchange student from Japan, Miki, who comes. So there was no Japanese exchange student at my high school. But the character of Miki, she's really based off of friends who I've made, since I became an adult and moved to Japan. And, and that was the kind of the fascinating thing for me to discover is sort of, there were the things that I was into that got me interested in Japan. But when I got to Japan, there's very much the flip version of that, and this is a real thing. It's like I've got several female friends who they are deeply interested in Native American culture. And what's interesting about Japan is such a homogenous society in many ways that the flip side of that is that when people develop a hobby,
Mhm.
they people tend to really go deep on one specific thing. I mean, I've got a friend who she's a photographer, and she her focus is photographing abandoned cities. And so it's not not just photographing interesting, beautiful buildings. They have to be abandoned. And it's interesting. I think people like kind of I don't know, maybe it's an escape valve. I don't know, what it is, but it's, a sort of, there's all this pressure day to day to fit into what society wants from you. And then, the reverse of that is like, well, if I'm going to define me for uniquely being me, I'm going to define me in a very, very specific way. So, Miki in a lot of ways is an extension of that. So there was no Miki who came to my high school, but there very well could have been. Let me put it that way.
What about Vikram?
There is a lot of my real life best friend in Vikram. It's also I mean all of these characters are mixtures of real people and people I've known, and kind of what what the imagination demands. I mean, certainly in my life, but I've also just seen in the life of a lot of my friends. It seems like often there will be friends who are in our lives, for one point, and kind of then the things that made us connect, we outgrow them. So,
Mhm.
Vikrami kind of comes from there. But then, when you're a writer, your responsibility is to, so I'm writing on some level, I'm writing from Sean's perspective, but you have to be empathetic and think about who these characters are and where they're coming from, and that's part of Vic is he is a middle child, and that's a lot of what I thought about. Is kind of like the middle child tends to be the one with the one who is the most conflicted, because it's sort of torn between the heroic eldest child and the kind of the youngest who gets to sort of do whatever they want to do. So I guess what I'm saying is there's the initial creative spark, and then once you sort of get into the writing, a whole lot of other inspirations come into play.
Well, what I was getting at is the real Vikram Indian?
Oh yeah, yes, he is.
Because
Yeah.
okay, because there's an important part in the film where there's a misunderstanding of the difference between American Indian and Indian American.
And that's based on real life. And
That happens.
and and this is part of where when writing it, I mean, there were many conversations with both the real life people and others about am I getting this right? Am I do I have a handle on what this actually felt like? Because it's particularly true in America. I mean, there's a lot of people who you kind of have multiple identities, and also which is my identity? And yeah, I mean, and that was certainly was the case for for the real life Vic, but also for for plenty of other people in my peer group.
Yeah, I had an idea for a similar character once in a Western, an Indian American who was constantly being confused for an American Indian, constantly having to explain.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What tribe am I from? I'm not from. I was born in Boston. What are you talking about?
Sure, yeah. And a lot of the result of that is having to then sort of define yourself in a very, very specific way, which that's definitely a big part of Vic's journey in the film.
Yeah, one, he seems to be a little embarrassed by his heritage, in that he insists on being called Vic rather than Vikram. He's trying really hard to fit in and to be seen as just one of your normal American guys who's also into Japanese stuff, but we don't really see him interacting with his own culture.
Yeah, and and a lot of that is where he's at in life specifically. I think when he gets a bit older, he's going to learn to embrace that, and and sort of discover that these things can coexist. But yeah, I mean, at this juncture, there's all of these pressures from the outside, and it's like, well, no, I'm going to define myself by what the world right around me is telling me is popular. And yeah, I mean, like, it's hard. It's really hard to define yourself when you've got all these conflicting forces around you.
Yeah. Well, even his love of anime and tokusatsu is not really his own. He says he liked it because Sean
which
it. I was into it because you were.
In the film, a lot of that is that's a cathartic moment where he's sort of lording it out there, and there's definitely some truth to that, but I think it's not the whole truth. I think he does like it, and part of it is that it's a world, or at least it was a world, that he could escape into. And part of what's happening in the film is that it seems like the real world around him is finally starting to recognize him for who he wants to be, and so it's like, oh no, I don't need this stuff anymore. But that's I think what that speaks to for both Sean and Vic in different ways is so much. I think of the experience in America of being into anime and into tokusatsu is it being a world to escape into that is somehow better or more interesting than the real world we're in. And that's a big thing that I wanted to explore in the film, is this idea that we perceive the world around us to somehow be lesser or not fun or not good, and so we escape into this fantasy world. And one of the things I want to play with in Ike Boys is having that fantasy world then invade our real world, and we discover from that, oh, hey, the real world we're in, this actually ain't so bad after all.
Yeah, they escape through, I don't want to call it a cursed videotape exactly, a magical videotape. It kind of reminded me a little bit of The Ring, but with a completely different tone.
Yes.
In that by watching there's something on the videotape, and by watching it can affect you, which is really just sort of an updated version of like the Necronomicon or something like that. But by reading this book, by receiving this information, you might be changed. So be careful. Be careful what book you open. Be careful what videotape you watch. It could open you up to maybe something awesome, maybe something terrible.
Yeah, I'll just open up this rhetorical question for the listeners, and I'm not going to give the answer, but it's so, was there something special about Sean, Vic, and Miki that when they saw the film, it was them specifically that were affected by it, or would this happen to anyone who watched the film? And I'll just leave that to the listeners to ponder.
Well, I certainly have some thoughts about that, but we will leave it to them to decide for themselves. I had concerns about Miki. I was worried about her.
Yeah?
Her home life.
Yeah.
She seems very surprised twice. Surprised that somebody would think she's cool, and surprised that somebody would be worried about her. And also just the fact that she wants to go on this spirit journey.
Yeah.
Because she thinks it'll tell her who she is. She doesn't seem to know who she is or what her purpose is or anything. So it just made me very curious about because we don't get to see her family at all or what her life back in Japan is like.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming she's not that popular if she's so, or considered cool back in Japan. And she seems all right once she's ready to go home, but I was a little concerned about her.
Well, yeah, she's not that popular back home, and so I mean, there's a few different things going on there. So one is typically, most Japanese families, affection is rarely expressed. I mean, it's like apart from when you're really, really, I mean, like a small child, you're not going to get typically that, like hugs and kisses and like, oh, I'm so proud of you from your parents. But what you're going to get is pressure to succeed. And when you do succeed, then pressure to succeed more. And so, I mean, there's inferiority complexes all over the place. And it's compounded by schooling, which is, again, it's all of this pressure to succeed, get into the best university, get into the best company. And so, that's where Miki is coming from. And it's interesting now because things are actually loosening up a little bit, but, the film is set in 1999. And at that time, things, it would still very much sort of like, Miki would be a child of, the people who built the bubble economy, which is, so it's a generation of go-getters, and then they have children who, it's like they expect them to be go-getters too. There's a lot of, just she's not generally going to be in a supportive environment. The other thing, even independent of a particular cultural background, is just when you're that age, I think a lot of us don't know who we are. I mean, I say that there's a lot of me and Sean, but there's also a lot of me and Miki. It's kind of like you get all of these competing messages in the world of like, oh, you need to be this, you need to be that. But also then sometimes you hear it's like, oh, you can be whatever you want to be. And so it's like, well, can I have a multiple choice test? I mean, it's like, what should I be doing with my life? So, there's something specific about her being, a Japanese woman of that generation, but it's also just, being a teenager.
One of my favorite lines in the movie was when they ask Miki what her favorite anime is. And she says The Lion King. Because when an American uses the term anime, they mean specifically Japanese animation. Yeah. But I suppose in Japan, it just means any cartoon, regardless of where it comes from. So when I was younger, there was a time when people used the term Japanimation, and I suppose somebody decided that was rude. Well, and then somebody figured out, why don't we call it what they call it?
Yeah, and this is, I mean, there's a few different things going on there. One is that I think if that exact same exchange had happened 20 years later, I think most Japanese people would like have a sense of anime as a uniquely Japanese thing. And at the time, that concept is still coming together. A lot of it too is just though that we as foreigners, I think, we sort of latch on to certain things that come out of Japan. And like, I mean, look, you and I met at a Godzilla themed convention. G-Fest is by far larger than anything remotely comparable in Japan. And, so a lot of it is just kind of like even just sort of framing the question of like, hey, what's your favorite anime? Like on some level, people might not even, certainly at the time, would not have even have thought in those terms. But the other thing going on is just Disney is super popular everywhere. So,
right, sure. A while back, I started trying to study Japanese just on the Duolingo app because I had this idea that I wanted to go to Godzilla Fest in Japan. Yeah. And then I found out that G-Fest is much bigger.
Yeah.
That might partly be, I mean, I think it's partly maybe Godzilla's more popular here. I don't know. But also, America's just bigger. There's just more people here. So even if it's the same percentage of the population that's into that, the total number is going to be much larger because we're just so darn big.
Well, there's a few different things going on because don't get me wrong, well, Godzilla and certainly tokusatsu in general and anime. I mean, obviously they're popular in Japan, or there wouldn't be so much of it made. I think the big difference of what's going on is I think maybe a good metaphor would be, or a good analogy would be a foreign cuisine that it's like, because it's not. So, like, in Japan, tokusatsu anime, these are things, it's like, you can go to the supermarket and get them anytime because they're just, part of these staples that are on the shelf.
It's just...
in the US, you have to go to the specialty store and get the specialty spices. And when it's like, when it's that, you pay more attention to them. And so you pay more attention to them, you sort of dig deeper into, okay, well, what are the ingredients here? Like what are these different spices? And and then the price goes up, and it's it's kind of the focus of your attention changes. But I mean, I'll tell you, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I went to G-Fest with Yumiko Shaku, who's also in Ike Boys. Of course, she was in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and she was really, I think, not at all expecting or prepared for how many people would know who she was, but be there and just be so ecstatic to see her. And because again, it's just kind of, it's in Japan, it's more people would take it, would take it for granted. And in the States, it's this special thing. So it's it's interesting.
Yeah, she seemed a little stunned.
It was
the whole
thing.
Yeah,
in a good way. I think it was a very, very positive experience for her.
Right. It's reminding me a little bit of, I just heard today on the radio that Sixto Rodriguez, also known as Sugar Man, has died.
Yeah.
He was a American musician who made a couple albums and then his career didn't go anywhere. And then it turned out that he was huge in South Africa, and he had no idea. For decades, he had no idea. And people in South Africa thought he was dead.
Oh my.
No, he just died this week, but they thought for long. Yeah, there were all these crazy rumors about how he had died. And at some point, a couple of guys decided to track down the producer of his album and try to find out what the deal was. And then they asked him, how did he die? And he's like, what are you talking about? I saw him yesterday. He lives down the street from me.
Oh, yeah.
So he ended up, later in life touring South Africa and finding out that he had all these fans that he never knew about.
Well, that's
apparently our own show is very popular in Sri Lanka. So
well, that's well, first of all, that's awesome. I'm just glad that he was able to connect with all those fans. This is, I think this speaks to, it speaks to a few things. It speaks to the power of the internet, because I think that can help disseminate things. But it's also, there's a principle that, art always finds its audience. It may not happen on a predictable timetable. This in a lot of ways, this is baked into Ike Boys, the idea that, the director of the cursed film within the film, like he, expected it to be this big, grand thing, and then it was lost. But 30 years later, it finds its audience, I think, look, just experiencing what we experienced at G-Fest, like that is borne out. Like art will find the people that it's meant for. And sometimes it might be after the creators are long dead and buried. So whenever the creators do get to know that their work is appreciated, that's a gift. So I'm glad that Sugar Man, right? Yeah, I'm glad that Sugar Man was able to get that gift.
Yeah. I was just hearing this. I'd heard the story before, but it came up again today because he just passed away at the age of 81.
This episode is brought to you by Snapple. Welcome to the Snapple Market Auditory Experience. Close your eyes. Imagine you're walking into your neighborhood store. You make your way to the back and reach for your favorite Snapple flavor. You can't wait. You take a sip. Whoa, that's a lot of flavor. What flavor are you holding? Now open your eyes and check out Snapple.com to find ridiculously flavorful Snapple near you.
This is Don Fry, and you're listening to Monster Movie Fun Time Go.
But back to G-Fest, was that your first time at G-Fest?
It was, and so we talked about the Shaki-san's response to it. I too candidly was a bit overwhelmed by it. It's not an understatement to say that Godzilla films changed my life, and in a lot of ways, sort of set the course of my life. Played a big role in making me want to be a filmmaker and making me want to learn Japanese, and just kind of heading down the life path that I've gone down. But compared to most people, I am a big Godzilla fan. But compared to maybe the average attendee of G-Fest, I feel like, I don't know. I felt like someone with a bachelor's degree surrounded by PhDs. It was it was just kind of this wonderful sensory overload between all of the cosplay and all of the T-shirts and all of the little snatches of conversation that you're hearing. Yeah, it was quite an experience.
That was our first time going as well. I've been to similar kinds of things about, for other geek culture things. You were talking about people in Japan getting really focused on what they're into. I'm more of a well-rounded geek. I have a broad interests, but although it's, because I decided to do this show, it's getting more focused. But I once went to the Superman celebration in Metropolis, Illinois.
Okay, yeah.
And because he's he's my favorite thing. And I thought I was a big Superman fan until I listened to the trivia competition. And there were guys who could tell you who played the villain in episode 2 from season 3 of The Adventures of Superman, starring George Reeves. And I'm like, okay, I have the DVDs of those, but I couldn't tell you who the star in each episode was or the title of each episode. So I understand exactly what you mean about I thought I was into this, but
yeah. So it's interesting. I am, I've spent, well over a decade, working in Japan, and so I've definitely, gotten a taste of what, sort of what Japanese fandom looks like. And I think, the conclusion I've drawn is that, Japanese fans get just as micro-y. It's just maybe they're less open about it. Part of this is American culture. It's like sort of when we feel something, we'll express it. So it's like, we're going to go and share our knowledge. And I think in Japan, it's more like it's like I visited friends' apartments, and it's like I will see a wall of all of the manga by a certain author, and it's like I'll be able to ask this question, and they'll immediately know which volume and which page to pull off the shelf, and oh yeah, this is this is where this happened. So yeah, I think fandom is fandom. Yeah, but it's a fascinating thing. I think a lot of it does come down to look, life is tough, and it doesn't get any tougher the older you get. So having an escape like that, I think a lot of it is just it's a way to help get through the day. And boy, I can certainly relate to that, because being a kid is hard, being an adult is hard, and having a world like that you can escape into and know all the particulars, that's a powerful thing.
Do you yourself have a particular favorite anime or tokusatsu or kaiju? What is your
So
what's your favorite?
And so I'm definitely answering favorite here, not best, because that's a whole
Oh, sure.
So yeah, so anime it would be yeah. I mean, well, it's a toss up. But so I mean, the original television run of Evangelion. I mean, I just love. I mean, I'm going to have to throw in the Tale of the Princess Kaguya. I don't. That's one. It's even like it's kind of an iffy question whether you categorize it as anime or not. I just think it's a beautiful masterpiece of filmmaking, and I think it should be in the conversation for best film ever made. Period.
I don't.
Also,
I don't
it's
know that one.
yeah,
Why would it
well,
not be considered?
it's Ghibli. It's by Takahata, and I mean so I mean I think it's readily in the conversation for some best some of the one of the best animated films ever made. I just it's beautiful. It's philosophical. It's I mean it's a very sort of slow paced, gentle film. I can't recommend it enough. Getting back to favorite tokusatsu though, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, that is a guaranteed pick me upper anytime I've had a bad day. And I mean, for obvious reasons, I've got a real soft spot for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Love that film to begin with, and now that I've worked with Shaku-san, I just kind of my affection for it has increased exponentially.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'm gonna this tale of Princess
Kaguya, yeah.
Kaguya.
2013.
Kaguya. That's on HBO Max with all the other Ghibli stuff. So I haven't
I'll check
seen
it out.
I don't know why
Yeah.
I missed that one,
Yeah.
but I will.
Yeah.
Check
By the way,
that one out. But why did you say it wouldn't be considered anime?
well, first of all, just both in its visual style and in its storytelling tropes, it's quite a departure from sort of the things that we think of when we think of anime, and I mean it's kind of just unique among animated films in general. So yeah, it is animation from Japan in Japanese, but it's.
Okay.
I mean, you'll know it when you see it. Just the aesthetic experience of the film, it's very very unique.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it sounds similar to somebody saying that Mouse isn't
Sure,
really a comic
sure.
book because it's not superheroes, because it's not what the person who doesn't know anything about comic books thinks about when they hear comic book. They don't think about Mouse. They think
Yeah,
about
no,
Justice
that's a
League.
great analogy.
I used to think I really liked anime until I joined the Anime of the Month Club. They would send you a VHS every month of a different anime, and when I started watching a lot of it, I was like, a lot of this doesn't make sense, and it started bugging me, and I was like, maybe I don't like anime. But then years later, I saw Fooly Cooly, which makes not a lick of sense, and I freaking loved it. So.
Well, it's
So I guess you just have to find the right thing.
well, I mean, the smoking gun in this is, most anime is done for, not enough money and not enough time. And, sort of the principle in filmmaking is you can have something good, you can have it cheap, you can have it fast, and you can
Right.
only have two of those at the same time. So a lot of anime,
Yeah.
you only get, you only even get one of those. And like okay, I mean, so my understanding of it is, I was telling you about my love of the Tale of the Princess Kaguya. My understanding of it is it's the most expensive of the Ghibli films, and that it didn't recoup its budget. So it's it's a masterwork, but not a commercial success, or at least
Sure.
not enough to for the bottom line. So yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I've got quite a few friends working in the anime industry, and it's brutal. I mean, it's interesting. I did a tour of Ghibli a few years ago for a project I was on, And that studio is so much like the exception that proves the rule, because it's like it's big and it's spacious and it's nice, and the animators are treated well. And then like you go into the other studios and it's like cramped, it's like old, like moldy buildings, like you're barely paid a livable wage if you're even paid a livable wage. And it's like, yeah, okay, so there's going to be some pretty bonkers stuff that comes out of this kind of working environment.
Well, I started asking myself, maybe they just are focusing on different aspects of storytelling than Americans or English speakers might. And then I did see something years later. I can't even remember what it's called, but basically saying that the Japanese are more concerned about whether something looks good or looks cool than if it makes sense.
There's a lot of truth to that. My experience is working in animation. There's definitely a premium placed on how cool do the shots look, and kind of then there's the poor, long-suffering screenwriter who's basically writing to support the shots, and again, it's kind of like, well, what do you think's going to happen? So yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
So, what are you working on next? Is there going to be a sequel? To Ike Boys?
So there is definitely,
as implied,
there is definitely a sequel in the works. Without giving away too much, it takes place a few years later. So I definitely plan to make another film in between. I'm working on a few things. There's something that I can't. There's a big thing I'm working on that I can't talk about, so I'm kind of dancing around that. But I have I've got a full animated project I'm working on. That's it's a big swashbuckling adventure story with dinosaurs. I think it's fair for me to say that. And I'm working on I've described it. It's a love story between a lonely woman and a cat, and that would be live action. And sort of the impetus there is, there haven't been a lot of great movies made for cat lovers, and I'm one of the world's great cat lovers, and I think that's a movie that needs to be made. So dinosaurs, cats, and some things I can't talk about. Those are the big things on my plate at the moment. Yeah, actually, there's a few things I can't talk about, but it's more or less all pretty fantastical things. I like playing in the genre sandbox because first of all, it's just fun. But I think you can say something. In some ways, you can say something more real and more true about the human experience by doing a fantasy story than you can with something that's fully grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I wanted to mention, just this is a non sequitur, but
yeah,
Billy Zane is in this movie.
He sure is.
Love Billy Zane. I freaking love The Phantom, and I think it's a crime that movie was not bigger than it was, because it was exactly what everybody always claims that they want, and then they didn't go see it.
Well, they're
like, why can't Hollywood make a nice, wholesome, and then they do it and no one goes.
Well, I'll tell you, you're in good company, though. That movie is definitely, its audience has swelled over the years. I think that's actually a pretty classic case of art finding its audience, just not in a way that the money counters are happy with. The Phantom, it definitely has, it is beloved at this stage.
I saw somebody at G-Fest who had some Phantom rings on their table.
So yeah,
but I already have one, so I didn't buy it. I was like, I have that exact ring.
Yeah,
I got it at this one summer when I was living in New York. They did this in Times Square, this sort of street fair, this movie street fair, where the studios all had little booths set up just there on the street, where they were giving away posters and T-shirts and things. And there was one for the Phantom. I got a T-shirt and a skull ring and a poster. And Michelle Trachtenberg was at another booth signing Harriet the Spy posters. Somewhere in this house I still have an autographed Harriet the Spy poster. Troma was there. All the studios, big and small, were there promoting whatever they had about to come out. And they acted like it was going to be an annual thing, but I don't think they ever did it again. I was shocked to see that exact same ring for sale on somebody's table at G-Fest.
Well, so we can definitely get back to Billy Zane in a moment here, but my favorite bit of cosplay that I saw at G-Fest was talking about non sequiturs. It was actually one of the gentlemen who came up to the autograph table for Chuck-san, but like I was kind of like saw what he was wearing and did a double take, and he saw me do the double take. And he's like, "Yeah," it's like I'm Hank Hill from King of the Hill.
Oh, right.
And then it was, we had the whole like propane accessories, and it was a beautiful moment. I have no idea what possessed him, but it was a beautiful moment.
I saw him at the costume parade, and I was a little bit like, "What? What?"
It's like, well, I should have busted out my Indiana Jones cosplay if we're just going whole hog non sequiturs here.
I know. I worked at a Ren Fair one summer where some customers came dressed in Star Trek uniforms, both Federation and Klingon, and they were they decided that they had beamed down to this planet that was still in its medieval stage of development, and they were just imposing their own storyline on the entire affair. And I was just like, okay, whatever. Yeah. They're having fun.
What's the Q episode? Captain, I object. I am not a merry man.
Yes. It was like that. Ben Browder's also in this movie, who I did not recognize at all, and I've seen every season of Farscape.
Yeah.
It wasn't until you were, I saw you doing your little question and answer at the screening, and I was like, oh, because his name just, I must have saw his name go by in the credits, but it just didn't pop out at me. And I was like, oh, I know that guy. I've watched that guy a lot.
Yeah, I know. Farscape is one of my all-time favorites. I've seen the whole show, I think 6 times. But yeah, Ben is, I mean, every movie should have Ben Browder in it. Like Ben is, like, he's kind of, he's what you want every actor to be, where he's really good at his craft. He's really hardworking, and he's just a good guy. He's just really fun to be around. I mean, he like the thing that like you can, if you sort of pay attention, I think you can probably sense in his performances is in a lot of ways Ben is just kind of like a big middle school boy. I mean, he loves to play pranks. He loves to. He loves, you know, whenever he can sort of sneak in a little sly joke, he will. And like he, you know, I think, you know, there are some people who, you know, and I would include myself in this, sort of, you know, you're always sort of like seeking a deeper meaning or a sort of like, you know, an insight to be found at any given moment. And Ben will do the opposite, where he'll just kind of, you know, he'll take the piss with everything. And I don't know. He's just great. He is just great.
Well, he was really good in Ike Boys. Not recognizing him at all, I was just really drawn in by his performance, and I just felt a great sympathy for his character as the single father who's trying, but his son is not appreciating the effort that he's putting in, because he's a teenage boy and he doesn't know, but he does seem to really be trying, and you know, not every parent does. Not every parent tries to understand, and he is.
Well, thank you, and I know Ben will appreciate that a lot. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, the character of Wayne, he again, you know, as like there's a bit of my own father in him, and then there's a lot of several very close. I've got a few close friends who are single fathers, and so all of that is kind of channeled into the character. And you know, it's interesting, sort of the process of building a character. You know, before we were on set, Ben and I spent a lot of time just talking, and I I talked about the men who inspired Wayne, and then Ben asked some questions. And I know he was also drawing some inspiration from some people he knew, and it was interesting just to sort of see his process, because he showed up a couple days before he actually had to start filming, and he would just kind of hang out on the set and read the script, sort of pay attention to what the other actors were doing, and just pay attention to the general vibe. And it was neat to watch his process, because it was clear that he was building the character, but also building the character within the context of the overall world that we were building. I think that dedication shows in his performance. It's a very genuine performance in a sometimes very heightened film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's very grounded. And very real. I really liked it. Next time you talk to Billy Zane, tell him
I'll pass that
I love
along.
him. But you can tell the same to everybody in the movie, because they were all really good.
I was blessed with a
really
good
good
cast,
job.
and one of the fringe benefits of it is that I've become pretty close friends with most of them. To one degree or another. I mean, we really, I think, it's a film. It's going to sound cliche, but it is a film that was made with a lot of love and care, and I think just that intent behind it. It brought us all closer together. I mean, I was just exchanging text messages with Christina, who played Miki, earlier this morning. I think this is one of the interesting things about making art is the sort of the human spirit and the intent that goes into it. It does show in the finished product, and nothing else. This is a film that was made with a lot of love and a lot of warmth.
Yeah, we can certainly see that in the finished product. I do want to mention briefly Quinn Lord.
Yes.
Who plays Sean.
Yes.
He was in a movie that we have previously discussed on this show during one of our 31 Days of Horror October marathons that we do every year. He was in Trick or Treat.
He was indeed.
As Sam. So he's in it, but not so as you'd notice, because his head's covered up the whole time.
Except it's not. He's also the peeping Tom in that film.
Oh, right. Yes, it does say that on the IMDb that he has another role.
Yes.
So that film's been out for a long time.
Yeah.
But I noticed last year in the Spirit Halloween store, Sam merchandise was all over the store, and I'm like, what is going on here? This why is this just now? Because I never saw any of it when the movie first came out.
Yeah.
But now his little burlap head is all over the place at the Spirit Halloween store. So.
Yeah, well, that's a real case of a film that's been, growing and building its audience over time. And again, it's just, it's the quality of the film. Quinn's great. I mean, Quinn in a lot of ways is the little brother I never knew that I had. We're into the same things, and we'll have whole conversations where it's just exchanging quotes from our favorite TV shows. So, I think we both kind of overwhelmed Ben a little bit with how well we knew Farscape inside and out.
Right.
But we're also both really into obscure, funky, British comedies. So I don't know if you're familiar with Toast of London.
Yes.
Starring. So we will frequently exchange text messages where it's hello Quinn, this is Clem Fandango. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Clem Fandango.
Yeah, it's no. No, you and Quinn will get along famously. Anyway, but getting back to Trick or Treat, So Quinn's great. I mean, he too is an imp, but I think he So Trick or Treat was the first acting role he ever did, and it's an important part of his life, but he's sort of it's grown in popularity as he's grown up. So I think it kind of amuses him a bit. I mean, we actually like he had a day off during the Ike Boys filming. He went to one of the local shopping malls and picked up a Sam doll from Hot Topic, and was just kind of like proudly parading it around the set, like it's like they didn't recognize me, and I've actually gone and visited him at a few horror conventions, and like he loves whenever there's a Sam cosplay, he always like asks if he can put it on, and so like to surprise people. So I think Quinn relishes the role that movie plays in his life.
Well, that's good. That's good. So, some people don't always appreciate the thing that got them started.
Yeah.
And they try to act like that didn't happen. So that's good.
Quinn's got a good sense of humor about it. But yeah, he's got just a good attitude.
Right. Do you think you're going to be going back to G-Fest again?
I certainly, both Shaku-san and I would certainly like to. We no concrete plans as of yet, but the desire is definitely there.
We already booked our rooms for next year.
Nice. Well,
the convention rate rooms sell out really quickly, and like 2 weeks after it was over, they posted that they were available, and I was like, crap, I better go ahead and reserve one. Yeah.
I mean, at some point, I would enjoy going just as an attendee because it was like I barely had any time to myself this last one, which is fine. But I mean, it was a one of a kind experience.
Well, I got to present a panel, which was nice for my first time to get to do that. It went really well. I'm hoping to do one again next year. Of course, we were running around recording stuff and just making contacts for this kind of thing, like we're doing now.
Yeah.
It's worked out really great. So we're probably we kind of wanted to go to Blobfest, which sadly is on the same weekend.
What is Blobfest?
Or it was this year. I guess it will be next year. So, the movie The Blob.
Yeah.
The historic theater where it was filmed has a street fair and a little film festival every year.
Oh my.
Where they show The Blob, and they show a couple of other movies, and they have some performers, and a street fair and various events, and they also then stage a run out of the theater. Where they recreate the moment from The Blob when everybody comes running screaming out of the theater. And the local news comes by and films it every year, apparently. And it's been going on for 23 years, but I only heard about it this year, and it's the same weekend as G-Fest. So,
I think you made the right call. But boy, that sounds fun.
So we probably won't do it next year, but maybe the year after. I don't know. We'll have to see if it's always on the same weekend.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's awesome to see like all of the love that these films still get. I mean, I am now the proud owner of a Gorgo plush, which just like it's like golly, like a Gorgo plush exists. Right. With as many problems as there are in the world, you take sort of moments like that, and you're like, this world ain't so bad.
I think I'll keep it.
Yeah. Beats the alternative.
Yes, it's a good thing it didn't all come to an end in New Year's 2000.
Well, I'll tell you that is one of my goals with the film is that 99 2000, that was a time when there was a lot of apocalyptic rhetoric going around, and we live in another era where there's a lot of apocalyptic rhetoric going around, and I guess one of the messages of Ike Boys is that we survived that, and we survived it because of friendship and friendship and love. So maybe we can survive the problems we're dealing with now because of friendship and love. So in my own small way, Ike Boys is meant to inspire people to think, the challenges we have now, they're not insurmountable.
Right. But it also takes hard work, because the reason the Y2K bug didn't bring everything to a crashing halt is people put in a lot of hard work behind the scenes to make sure it didn't. A lot of people afterwards were like, a lot of people had the attitude like, oh, it turned out to be nothing. Like, no, it turned out to be nothing because we found out about it and put a lot of effort into fixing it before the date came.
This is very, very true. Yes. It's well, there's a lot of people putting effort into the things we're dealing with now. So it's if nothing else, if my cute little movie can give them a moment of pleasure, then I played my part.
But you put a lot of effort into it though too. So
I sure did.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a good note to end on. So thank you for joining us today, Eric McEver, and thank you everyone for listening.
Oh, thank you for having me.
As always, I have been one of your hosts, Precious D. Remember to keep calm and take shelter in basements. Whatever you do, do not misuse science. And we will not see you, but you will hear us next time on Monster Movie Fun Time Go.
All right.
You've been listening to Monster Movie Fun Time Go. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on your podcasting platform of choice. Our theme song is by the Texicano Folk Rock Punk featuring Lita Lopez. You can support the show, find links to our social media, and even leave us a voice message at anchor.fm/MMFTG.
Fun time go!